Let's do it. We got this story from MSN.com. BRICS gold-backed common currency, a shock to global fiat money system, says economist, as Russia confirms launch in August. Oh boy, is this one esoteric. I'm sure many of you at home are like, yo, I don't even know why I clicked the link to this video because I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm sure many of you who are in the know saw the headline and went, holy crap. And I'm sure most of you who are really in the know said, Tim, we already knew this, but bear with me. This is big news. BRICS is the principal rival to basically NATO and the Western powers. The world operates on the US dollar as its reserve currency. You want to buy oil, you use US dollars. With BRICS launching this currency backed by gold, they're basically giving a massive middle finger to the US and telling all the countries in the world, our money actually means something, theirs does not. Further, we've already seen countries like Saudi Arabia trying to do deals with China, or actually doing them, to trade oil in yuan. This means we are inching ever closer to the U.S. no longer having the reserve currency. And you know what that means? That means all of you at home, you're going to see your standard of living drop dramatically. And therein lies the double-edged sword when it comes to international politics. The United States does not export enough. We export culture, movies, music, sure. But other countries can do that. Other countries can export a lot of stuff. So what do we really provide? To be honest, military might. When we want oil, we print the dollars, we buy the oil. When any other country wants oil, they need to buy dollars from us first. With this deal from BRICS that basically shuts down our international Ponzi scheme, or whatever you want to call it, and then all of a sudden we have nothing to trade. What will the U.S. trade for BRICS currency? That's the big question. What are we manufacturing? What are we exporting that BRICS would want so that they would give us gold-backed currency that we could use to buy oil with? Yeah. So here's my fear, and a lot of other people's fears. The reason why the deep state, the bureaucratic state, the neolibs, the neocons want war is to make sure we don't lose this status. So the likelihood that we enter into a dramatically escalated conflict is ever so increasing, to the point where, let me tell you how desperate the machine has become. Earlier, last year or so, I think it was last year, when Russia was accused of using cluster bombs. The U.S., the Western forces, claimed that was potentially a war crime. Now the West has become so desperate that Joe Biden has approved the sending of cluster bombs to Ukrainian forces, something that they had previously said could be a war crime. This is what I'm talking about. The people saying, oh, you can't do that because that's evil and wrong, and then a year later being like, if we lose this, we're done for, so just do it anyway. How far off are we from someone saying, yeah, well, nukes are no longer off the table?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a very frightening situation. All I really have to say about it is this, to quote the Venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen: if a nation would behave more justly if it were conquered, it should expect to be conquered. In the United States has not been a nation which operated in a moral way domestically or on the international stage in a very long time. I've seen some of that turning around. I think the overturn of Roe v. Wade and the fact that we've saved tens of thousands of children has been incredible. I think there's been massive backlash against the LGBTQ agenda. More young people are waking up and seeing the farce of the sexual revolution. But ultimately, this country has a lot of problems, and I hope that we can pull through them. I hope that the United States can be a strong, dominant nation that behaves morally, but that's not the track we've placed ourselves on over the past 50 or 60 years. So I hope for good things, but I don't know that I necessarily expect them.
I mean, considering the fact that the BRICS currency it's already in motion, it's not something that's being talked about anymore. It feels like the writing's on the wall that the petrodollar the time is limited, mm-hmm. And I mean, people need to plan accordingly. If we're in as much debt as we are to China and to other countries and stuff, and our national debt's like it is, and we lose the value, the status as the reserve currency of the world, interest rates are going to keep going up, and yep. The buying power of your dollar is going to keep going down, and it's going to have a massive effect on the average person. So it unfortunately, these things it's slow moving. So a lot of people have kind of shut the idea of a currency crisis out, because it has been something that you've heard people talking about it since like 2008. Like since the the financial crisis, people have been talking about, oh, if you keep printing money, then there'll be inflation, et cetera, and we're in debt. And I feel like the average person has kind of just gone numb to that. And if people are numb to it and they haven't been preparing for it, or they don't, it's going to come back and bite them in the ass. And as usual, the poor people in the U.S. and people on the margins, people that are just making it are going to fall into poverty, and people that are already poor, they're going to be screwed.
Well, and to be clear, the point I want to make here is that I hope that doesn't happen, right? Again, I hope the United States is able to maintain our status as world reserve currency, and we turn a corner and start behaving more morally with respect to our conduct, both on the foreign stage and domestically. And there's actually some precedent to think that might happen just based on the last year or two and the way some things have improved in some areas. But yeah, I mean, if we lose world reserve currency status, if this country continues to spend and print money in unsustainable ways and also get involved in conflicts we have no business being involved in, I think it's probably fair to say that we're not going to be able to sustain that. And just like any nation that starts fooling around because they become powerful and hubristic, we're going to end up seeing our own collapse.
But what if the Democratic nominee for president in the debate says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to invade Ukraine. We're going to, in order to fight the Russians, I shouldn't say invade Ukraine, but we're going to send boots on the ground in Ukraine, boots on the ground in Syria. We're going to build a corridor through Syria, Turkey, into Europe to offset the Russian gas monopoly. And we are going to do these things specifically to destroy the economies of the BRICS nations to prevent them from subverting the world reserve currency. What if they just flat out came out and said, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it? Because our economy is propped up by the fact that we print money and we don't export. And the only thing we can do is point guns at the rest of the world and tell them that they must serve us. And all of your computers and all of your components, the materials in there are mined by children who are working as slaves. You can have that, or you can live in squalor. Make your pick. What do you do?
Oh, the average person would decide to...
They'd vote for... I think they'd vote for the machine in 2 seconds and then make an excuse.
I think, the machine makes excuses for itself, right? So I think the way it's going to be advertised to the American people is there's some human rights atrocity or violation that's occurring in these countries, so now we have to go step in and intervene.
That's what they're doing now. But I think the issue is when they were like, cluster bombs are a potential war crime, and then Joe Biden's like, well, might as well send cluster bombs. It's like, okay. That's not going to work. You're not going to be able to go and say, look, a war crime is happening, and then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. That propaganda, it's not going to work. Regular people might just lie to themselves to justify why we should be in war, but...
Yeah, what do you think?
I don't know. The whole thing is scary to me.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, there's not a good option either way as far as what you just said. I don't know. It's all doom and gloom,
I mean, in reference to what you said about, Tim, about cluster bombs and stuff, I mean, the Vietnam War started in 1954, I think is when, and the French were kind of doing most of the combat role there and doing most of the fighting. And the U.S. didn't actually really get involved until 64. And then it was a whole nother 10 years. It's completely reasonable to say that, we're a year and change in on the war in Ukraine or whatever. And all this stuff that we said we weren't going to send, all of these things that the government said they weren't going to be doing, they keep coming back and saying, okay, well, now we're going to. So there's no actual line that the U.S. won't cross, or at least that we as a population can reliably say, okay, we believe the government won't do this. The government has demonstrated over and over that they'll say one thing, and as soon as it comes time to be what they deem a necessity, they say we need to go ahead and do this for this reason. It's completely expected or should be expected that if the U.S. has said, no, we're not going to do this, if the conditions on the ground demand it, or an argument can be made that the conditions on the ground demand it, they're going to do it. And I think that is up to and including a nuclear exchange with Russia. If it gets to that point. Now, I'm not saying that it will, but if you put Americans on the ground in Ukraine, I could see that happening. And I don't see the off-ramp for this to get us out of eventually sending people to fight in Ukraine.
This is why I bring this up. This is the tit for tat. We say, oh, no cluster bombs. You can't do that. Then we do cluster bombs. They start producing an international gold-backed currency. We have this here. Take a look at this. Willem Middlecoop says 41 countries have applied for BRICS membership. This is massive. This is what is this, like just about a third of the world?
Yeah, and I mean, and
not
to
in
many
terms
in our
of
government,
population,
but
maybe with China.
To many in government, I mean, these are fighting words saying that we are going to use a currency that is not controlled by the United States of America. Is something that's very frightening for those in the ruling elite to hear. And to be frank, those are frightening words for your average person too, if they really consider them. Because if we do lose our status as world reserve currency, the quality of life is going to diminish for basically everybody in this country. Now, you got to imagine the position that foreign leaders are in and foreign nations are in. They see how we have absolutely abused our status as world reserve currency and the fact that people need to trade in our dollar and are compelled to by the way the market functions currently. In 2020, when COVID-19 crippled our economy, or at the very least, I should say, when the lockdowns and the overreaction to COVID-19 crippled our economy, what our government did is they responded by engaging in the most gigantic transfer of wealth that has ever occurred in all of human history. And they gave virtually all of the money to the wealthiest people in this nation and devalued the currency of everyone who had savings in order to engage in that transfer of wealth. Now, anyone who was paying attention at that time said, this is going to massively harm those in the lower classes. This is massively going to harm people who have saved. And this is also going to harm people who own small businesses because the SBA was expected to handle something like 10 times its yearly budget over the course of a month or 2 weeks in order to get this bailout money to small businesses. Now, the giant businesses that got, $4.2 trillion in low interest loans, were able to leverage that to purchase up a lot of those smaller businesses after they closed down. And it was done with your currency being devalued. Now, poor and working class people don't have a whole lot of recourse for that. But you know who does have a lot of recourse for that? Rich people in other nations who are holding U.S. currency who didn't get that payout, as well as oligarchs and rulers of other countries that have stashed U.S. dollars because they had some faith that the United States dollar was going to carry its value over into the future. And many of them are saying, you know what? We're probably going to use our clout to punish the American dollar and punish people who are in control of it by pulling out and signing on to some new currency.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.